What's up? Time for another reflection. My hair's drying out, so I'm looking like a freaking crank again. But yeah, the uh, I don't know where to start with this. The the YouTube fifth dimension spiritual community, the electronic spiritual community, and trying to interface your subconscious mental astral body into the real world. It's crazy. This is honestly so far beyond what normal human experience is supposed to be about. It's very awesome. Like, it's just, how do you explain this kind of stuff to people? And how do you tell what's really going on? Like, I honestly feel like I was just kind of chucked off the ship into this, and like, I try to do it in a very selfless way, so it's not about me. Because when you watch a YouTube video, it's not to you directly, but when you're trying to operate from the fifth dimension collective perspective, you have to. You can't just look at it like fantasy. You have to take it seriously, and it's a very ominous and odd place to operate from. Having a smoke, and yeah, generally humanity has been. We're much more designed to operate cognitively from your hands. You read a book, you know, operating from a telepathic space, non physicality is not easy. And it takes an incredible knowledge of self that many of us are not inclined to have developed at all. In my culmination of videos, I'm trying to kind of map out what's been happening to me. That way I can understand it and reflect back on it later. But I feel it's necessary because it applies to all of us. And I love the idea. It's very It's Christ says you must become a child to enter the kingdom of God, and I think part of that is awe, part of it is openness, and part of it is fear. And um, the older you get, the more hardened you are, and like things don't catch you off guard generally. I mean, even if you witness a miracle or something crazy, you don't like uh, at least I haven't broken down in like utter fear. I just witness and observe it and be like, wow. But I keep myself in a very stable energy, so it's not like, you know, there are people who talk about when they encounter an angel, like you just pass out, or it's terrifying. Like that level of energy is not. We're not designed to be able to experience that kind of thing. But I think what's going on is kind of a ready or not. The track guns fired. If you're not learning how to operate from a totally new level of uh, human experience, you're going to get left in the dust. And this kind of thing highlights how critical it is that the collective should be healing, and we should be unifying together as humans and talking about these kind of things. People are talking about it. They share, and because this is too much information for one person to be able to handle. I mean, the work and um, the essence of leadership of even just a group of humans, like from you're representing your uh, representatives of a certain group of population. That's a large task if you're going to really get out there and meet all of your constituents. When you start adding in non-physicality to it, it requires a really unifying, grounded, between everybody. This whole war for territory, attrition between people is going to become really freaking problematic, I think, in the future here, because uh, we're starting to discover we're not the top of the food chain. And not only that, like we're more like cattle. Because talking about it, my previous video about the inhumaneness of a lot of the stuff that's going on in the like the worker class and the political global elite class are so detached from each other. They literally live in two different worlds. And in order to operate in this fifth dimension stuff, you really have to put trust in. And why should we trust at all after what's happened for the past 20 years? My whole life. I mean, there's absolutely no reason that I have to trust anyone ever for any reason ever. And I don't generally, but strangely I'll trust different teachers and things fairly openly. If it resonates with the inner self, you kind of have to. You can't just totally live an isolated island. As much as I'd like to, this is one of the things moving forward that's going to be tough for me is complete and total openness. And it's one of the things we really need, the Christian principles of the seven deadly sins for this kind of thing, because they have effects if you break them that are very detrimental to the mental space. You think you live, this is my little house. This is my area. This what I do in here doesn't affect anybody else. Well, it kind of does. And that's why the gates of heaven are so narrow. It's because when you really start seeing what it takes, the amount of openness and the amount of discipline that it takes, I mean, uh, to uphold being totally boundless in yourself, selfhood. Like that in heaven, I'm guessing there no lies, no separation, and in order to pass that uh, gate and quota to be worthy of that, holding that space is, I don't know how anybody does it. I mean, you really have to be like a saint. You really do. And that might be why there's 7 billion people on the planet. Is we've we take in these ideas intellectually, but the amount of people that fully embody these practices and nail it down, very few. And I think that if we had been properly spiritually prepared, we'd be realizing that overpopulation wouldn't be a problem if we were evolving and moving to the non-physical state, but people are not getting past the physical gates, and that more and more people are just reincarnating back into physicality and not making it through the narrow. And I understand why. It's they talk a lot in theosophy about right thought. It's much easier to be evil, uh, unworthy, than to really step up and be a person worthy of total openness and like like being totally interconnected, where you can like basically see. We can't really comprehend this because we're physical beings, but see right through somebody, see everything that they're about just by looking at them. That's such a crazy concept. And humanity would benefit massively from that. You just have to become selfless. Like selfless, not as in like you don't exist, but you have to realize that, like, all right, we're all one consciousness, therefore we are that interconnected. And you know God does see everything. One of the separate things of my spiritual awakening was hearing multi-dimensional light language. I was not using any technology or anything. I was just meditating, and I heard it was like a booming but silent voice that spoke an entire conversation in one word, and what I got was just truth. But it was like I was asking a question, and this being was responding, and it was like a conversation that happened in one word and just flooded my being with truth. And I was like, oh. And I've been spending the past 6 months to a year just recovering from that, like that amount of information just like exploding through my being. And that's why I've started these reflections, is because I feel like I literally have taken in like books and books, hundreds of pages of information and knowledge, and a period of like a year, 6 months. I mean, the amount of different, it's like getting whipped around in a freaking washing machine. Like, just like, you know, and tons of like Kundalini experiences where like it literally, like, you can feel the energy go up your spine, and like you'll have like you literally blow your own back out, to use a sexual term, but it's freaking, it's painful, but it really feels like it's like I'm burning off sin and karma, and like really connecting into like the core of being that very few people talk about, or like there's a lot of talk about it, but it's in a very it doesn't get to the heart of it. Language is such a barrier to being able to, it's like the tower. We're cursed with the Tower of Babel moment where we barely can understand each other. And I feel like what's happening now is we're having that reversed, where we're going to be able to have that Tower of Babel moment reversed, and we're able to connect our, like, a being to being level communication. That might even be what the Messiah is, the second coming. Is we get a curse that's been on us for, what, since the fall of Atlantis? Is that how old it is? Oh, my spine. But yeah, like the modern civilization has preached the individualism of people so hard that we've forgotten how interconnected we really are. And it kind of sucks when, well, it does suck for everybody, because you really got to straighten your shit out. You got to get it together. You can't, like, it's literally the mask getting torn off, and you can't fake the funk, as they say. And it's a rough tumble. But I'd much rather have it now, when I still have a body and I can repent and I can clean myself up and get things in order. But I think that's kind of what the apocalypse is. It's the Greek word apocalypse means like a great unveiling. And yeah, I think that's what's happening. And there's going to be a lot of people that aren't able to make that transition because, uh, you know, reaching those higher frequencies and ascending the ladder of consciousness, you know, yeah, a higher consciousness is great, but it also means that higher awareness, you're going to be able to hold more light, and there will be more shadows that become visible. Oh, oh man. I feel it in my spine right now. But these things aren't taught. It's kind of learned through experience. And the necessity for discernment becomes much stronger. and you get it. Like you're able to see what's evil and what's good, but you still have to operate with a 3D body, and you know, uh, it's one of the hardest things is to be with that level of awareness, and you still have to operate in the physical world because language doesn't do it. And there's very few people. It's not. You can't just like approach somebody in a cafe and have a conversation and be able to get to the heart of like there's people that are like, do you get it? You know what's going on? And then instantly there's like, well, do they mean this or do they mean that? The ability to transmit truth from one person to the other is so much harder than we realize. I mean, honesty is key, and that's why trust is so important. But even if the most trustworthy person in the world still has to communicate with words, and people can take things a million different ways, and I think that's they say gossip is godless. Well, that gossiping interferes with your ability to. You're basically letting your mind turn into a hamster wheel and filling up what you think of somebody else without their presence being there. I think in Islam they talk about backbiting being a major sin. And that's talking without somebody present, talking about somebody without them being in the room. And I think that this sort of thing really interferes with our human ability to ascend the ladder of consciousness, which is a shame because what we're capable of is really superhuman. Like I see what Nietzsche was talking about in some of his writings, like at the the agony of how dark it really can be and how cold and heartless the earth can be, but then also the superhuman aspect of Nietzsche, where he's talking about the it's not about like we become transhumanist and like put a chip in our brains, although we're doing that. The real superhuman evolution is we're regaining senses that haven't existed. I mean, it's hard to say, but clairvoyance and all this stuff has been largely put down. Clairsentience, clairaudience, and just called insanity. But I don't. It's incredibly hard because each human is at their own level of development, and you can't universalize ascension at all. And beyond that, there's a lot of people who deceive themselves and say, "I'm in higher consciousness, dude, and we're doing it." But if you really were, you'd be like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about this. This is dark, and it's like it's not fun, really." I mean, there's a lot of good that comes from it, but you. I mean, people who've done like psychedelics and that sort of thing will somewhat have an idea. Like a couple months ago, I did a dose on some mushrooms, and like I was just flowing with the energy, hearing I mean, it was like you tap into the collective consciousness in a way at times. It's different for everybody, and it can happen different ways. But I was just sitting there floating, like holding my lighter and feeling it crumble into like pixelated cubes. And while I'm doing that, I'm hearing people speak to me in different languages. And it's like I was listening to like a radio transmission, like through an earpiece. Just using my brain, sitting there in a meditative state. It's an incredible, crazy thing, and all of this comes upon you without any awareness in your conscious mind of that happening. It's like I feel like you can be an ascended soul with incredible spiritual knowledge, but then you look like me. This like I don't look like a saint or anything. And why do I just? Why am I learning this? How am I doing this? You know, so people talk about when you become a prophet, or like Moses didn't want to receive the tablets, and I can understand why. It's overwhelming on the body mind spirit complex, and it's a lot of fun, but it's also it gets to another idea from Tanya. You can be like crushed with absolute pain and suffering, but you're also in intense joy, and I understand that completely now, because you realize your animal soul body is so low on the totem pole to what you could be and what you're designed and intended to be. Like God has given us, you know, the most incredible uh, potential, and nobody gets anywhere near to the first levels of the ladder. I mean, we mostly just fight wars and freaking bicker, and that's so. I mean, it's testament to show how poorly evolved we really are, and maybe not poorly evolved, but like we're not anywhere near the top of the food chain. There's a lot of levels above a human that we have no idea about, and Rudolf Steiner talks about, like, what is it? Angels. So it'd be saints, angels, cherubim, seraphim, thrones. There's a lot more levels than that. That's a very introductory level. Starting from, I mean, the spirits of form, that's literally how he called it. I heard somebody speak at an analogy. It's so they create the human form like a silkworm creates a uh, silk. So that's how the human essence is created. They calling me, and it's just weather. But to imagine how high up the hierarchy that really is, from beneath God to where form is created, and that's the form of, like, so when Muhammad was in the desert, I think he was in a cave and he met Gabriel, the messenger. It, Gabriel came down to like the human form, and Muhammad was uh, very keen on. He's like, "Let me see you at full power." And Muhammad says that it was like he took up the entire skyline, and of course Muhammad just like collapsed. I mean, this is when you really get into experiences with angels. Most people just pass out and die, well, in the case of the Hebrew, they talk about everybody died, and then Hashem put life back into them, revived their souls, and then they got up. And I think it's that level, because the experience I've had is it's like your body is being crushed by like thousands of pounds of weight. Maybe I'm just going through judgment, and being shown the truth, but it's like it crushes your entire mind, body, spirit complex. And I've been like a zombie now for over a year, and like barely able like to put the consciousness back into my body. Is the way I was describing it. It was literally like I was being pulled out of my body in a way, which is why it sounds kind of demonic. This isn't like necessarily a good thing. It's not. It takes work, a lot of work, and nobody would ever understand the work you're doing ever. Oh, and like this kind of stuff is just talked about on YouTube willy nilly, and like you can go through the comments and like people like just saying the most immature stuff and just speaking from their like barely conscious mind, and it's so much like if you're really experiencing it, you don't really talk about it. I think that's where the confusion about these secret societies and things is like they're secret because people don't talk about it because it's not something you speak about. It's something you like you experience it and then you share it with other people on that level maybe. But like language just gets in the way. Oh, oh. But yeah, the more I look into it and understand it, it's a freaking. There is so much that goes on this planet Earth that we have no concept about at all, and it's on the consciousness side. Science thinks it's so high and mighty. As if we've done any kind of advanced science in the past 100 years. Like, yes, we have very advanced scientific thinkers, but like, you know, really, the, it's like an endless ocean of scientific understanding, and the things we discover in physics can very easily be overturned 10 or 20 years later. It's crazy. It's like science is like a strange form of magical illusion where like the observer effect plays in, and like you're watching yourself discern the reality of God's creation, but God is infinite and he could just change it and then it will be a totally different thing. So we're like learning how to use our observational skills and scientific method and like trying to really hammer things into a line, but we're so limited even with all of our technology and like uh, objective understanding of things. But reality begins with consciousness, which immediately throws out any objectivity when you really get down to it. But yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it near that for now. Probably do another video in a little bit, and then my hair will be a little curlier and a little crazier. But my point being here is that we got a lot to learn. I think we crossed the threshold into some seriously unknown territory. There's a lot of concepts and understandings that you know I've been blessed enough to be following a sheikh who has he's a beautiful way of articulating religious thought into a Western mind. And he's been able to really articulate, the magnitude of these realities and like how, you know, it's a beautiful thing because like the potentiality that's there, but we have to really come to the realization that we're ants. Like, but yeah, I think from this we should go forth with awe and wonder and really start working at becoming less animalistic, like fighting and bickering. And, you know, we have hundreds and hundreds of years of books of some very deep thought, and it's nothing. Like, we're barely at the tip of the iceberg for our, like, uh, potential in so many different aspects. But yeah, I think faith in God and God Himself, that's a prerequisite. You don't want to be the vine chucked into the fire of the sun. The firmament's there. You want the firmament. You want to be on earth. You don't want to go into the sun and be, you know. I think that's what hell is. You get chucked out of the firmament. You're not reincarnating for a while. You got to start the planetary cycle all over. And we're one solar system. And this, it's crazy. It's magnificent beyond measure. Yeah. I wonder if I can pause the live. No, I can't. Well, and I think I'm going to leave the video there. Do another one in a little while. 3 a day. I like the number 3, so I'm going to be doing maybe 3 a day, different topics, as long as I can handle it. Because, you know, you can keep this stuff in your head, but then it just evaporates. That's one of the. I'm really into Islam lately, but they talk about, you know, Allah gives you this knowledge. You don't want to just hold on to it for yourself because it'll just evaporate. You know, our memory is so terrible. And there's a great book in regards to this by P.D. Ouspensky. Uh, is it In Search of the Miraculous? But he talks about self-remembering because, you know, we have an incredible potentiality that you just got to remember that. We get so caught up in the fleshly. I got to put food in my face and freaking be comfortable and whatever the fuck. But like, if you start really diving into the depths of the human, like, core of the mental body of energy and understanding, there's a lot there. Man, I really got to get a haircut. I look like a freaking goober. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Shout out to the future and anybody who listens.